from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
What a bitter ending to a season that started off so well.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes.
So a game where I want to remind you guys, I told you to smash the over for this one. Early last week, the over-under was 55.5. It ended up closing over 60. These teams combined for 83 points. And that should not be surprising to anyone, given how both teams had vulnerabilities. And boy, the word vulnerabilities is putting it nicely on defense. Miami put up 41 points with Cam Ward only playing half of the game. Folks, I'm upset. I'm very upset because no matter who was on the field and when, no matter which quarterback was on the field, I wanted to win that football game. I know that rival fans have been trolling us for, you're in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, who cares? I wanted to win that game. And I don't care that Emory Williams was on the field late. And boy, we saw so many of the same, no matter who was on the field, we saw so many of the same problems in that Pop-Tarts Bowl. We're going to talk about all of that because, guys, the 30-minute Emory Williams audition did not go well. And I have been someone who has or had really believed in him. And I will be the first to admit my faith was very much shaken based on what we saw yesterday. So we'll talk about the quarterback questions that Miami is going to have heading into next season. We'll also talk about this ridiculous fake outrage that's being directed at Cam Ward after the game yesterday. But let's talk about why Miami let us down in this 42-41 loss to Iowa State, finishing a season 10-3, 10 wins, but that's after a 9-0 start. You lose 3 out of your final 4 games. Miami's defense, as usual, was nowhere near good enough. And Mario Cristobal admitted after the game, right before the backdrop of the post-game presser nearly, crushed him and fell on him. Mario Cristobal admitted that this defensive unit, has not met the standard for Miami Hurricanes football. So we're going to talk about it, and we'll find out during this very long offseason what changes and what tweaks need to be made. Obviously, part of those tweaks that need to be made, we're not just talking about coaching. We can talk about coaching. We're not just talking about coaching. We're also talking about stacking talent. And I know Miami is already working to do that in the transfer portal, and hopefully they're not done stacking more defensive talent, because in this Pop-Tarts Bowl against Iowa State, and I give Iowa State credit, we saw basically all of the same issues for Miami's defense. Poor tackling angles, confusion on misdirection plays, which has been a theme all year, receivers running wide open with several yards of green grass between them and the nearest Miami defender. And yeah, of course, a lot of this is on talent, which needs to improve, but I believe coaching also has to be held accountable when this unit never looks prepared. And yeah, now that Mario Cristobal is officially entering off-season mode as of, probably this morning at midnight, he's got decisions to make about who to retain on this defensive staff and who not to. The Hurricanes ended up giving up 415 yards of offense. And that's, I know Miami put up more offense than they gave up, but 415 yards of offense given up, that's not the standard of Miami football. And this has got to be fixed next year, because this defense, what would Miami's record be if we could have played at times just competent defense? Would Miami be a one-loss team? Would Miami have been undefeated if competent defense could have been played when you had the number 1 offense in the country? And, I do point some fingers, a lot of fingers at the pass rush. I know that the back end is the real mess, but the pass rush was supposed to be bailing out the secondary all year by, giving quarterbacks a second or two, if any, to throw the football. That didn't happen consistently enough outside of a handful of games. I'm not going to say Miami's pass rush never stepped up, but they didn't step up consistently. And against Iowa State in that loss yesterday, Miami produced only 1 sack in that game. 41 points and 524 yards of total offense, which is what Miami put up. That should be enough to win any game. When your offense is putting up 524 yards and scoring 41 points, that should be enough to win any game. Pop-Tart Bowl, Cheez-It Bowl, Cereal Bowl, you win any game with that. Cam Ward, and we'll talk about him, he spotted the team 31 points in just 30 minutes, and they couldn't finish out the game for him. I was hoping the defense would give us more in that game because they had a full month to prepare for one opponent. I was wrong. And I know that personnel, certain players not being available, they made things tougher. They made things a lot tougher because while, the defensive line and the linebacker positions were pretty much at full strength for the Pop-Tart Bowl, a thin defensive backfield was made even thinner than usual. Daryl Porter didn't play, neither did Damari Brown, who's still, he's banged up. He's still been dealing with that stuff he was dealing with all year. O.J. Frederick seemed to pick up an injury in the game. You didn't have, obviously, Robert Stafford, who transferred, or Jadis Richard, who got hurt late in the season. So Miami already had a depleted defensive secondary that was beyond depleted in this game. So, of course, we've got our negative takeaways on the defense. Another negative takeaway from this game, which has been, a theme for, I'm not even going to say all year long, it's been a theme for most of my life, is a lack of team discipline. Is this just a problem that's embedded in Miami's DNA as a program? Like, is this something that it's going to take an exorcism to fix this? Because I know Mario Cristobal works really hard to try to make this team more disciplined and to get them to stop shooting themselves in the foot. He's obviously not been successful at that. Miami commits 6 penalties for 46 yards. That was compared to just 2 penalties for 20 yards by Iowa State. The Cyclones, by the way, are the least penalized team in college football. So that's what discipline looks like. But the other part of it wasn't just penalties. Miami loses the turnover margin 3-0, -3 in the turnover margin. And yeah, honestly, when you go -3 in the turnover margin, you're probably lucky you only lost the game by 1 point. I mean, Miami was still right there despite that stat. You had a bad snap, which is uncharacteristic of Zach Carpenter. I was really surprised by that snap that led to a fumble and a quick score for Iowa State. You had an unfortunate fumble by Mark Fletcher, who just didn't take care of the football after he picked up a first down. That was unfortunate. And then you had the heave by Emory Williams that was picked off at the end. And yes, we will talk more about Emory Williams, believe me. And so, only Miami can make a 10-win season feel like 6-6. And I know that after we've had more time to digest this, and after we zoom out, we're still going to look eventually and say, 10 wins, that was a good season. Hopefully we remember the good times, and we'll talk about these good times and what Cam Ward especially has provided for this program this year. And Damian Martinez, we're going to talk about him. So I know, again, we may look back on this season and say, okay, 10 wins, that was a good year, but it doesn't change the disappointment of starting 9-0, controlling your own destiny, and finishing the season 10-3, which means you lost 3 of your final 4 games. And yes, I wanted to win the Pop-Tarts Bowl because reaching 11 wins, that's something Miami hasn't done in 21 years. And reaching that 11-win mark would have been significant to me, and we fell short.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The BYU Cougars just notched the most dominant bowl win in program history.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
BYU, on the heels of an 11-2 season with a dominant win over the Colorado Buffaloes, just put together the most dominant bowl win in their 41 bowl appearances in program history. Whoa, Jake, hold on. What about 1984? What about the 1997 Cotton Bowl? What about the 1980 Miracle Bowl? All of those are absolutely in the running for the most impactful and biggest bowl wins in BYU football history. Absolutely. The stakes on those games Obviously, you can't get any higher than what BYU accomplished in 1984 with their Holiday Bowl win over Michigan. That clinched the national title for the BYU football program. But consider the individual bowl games. Of the 41 BYU has played now, the 41st was this past Saturday night down there in the Alamo Bowl against the Colorado Buffaloes. Consider every other bowl game, everything that went into those bowl games, the opponents, everything considered. Is this not the most dominant win in BYU bowl history? I don't think you can argue otherwise. A lot of the big wins in BYU's bowl history are nail biters. Think about it. They had to rally to beat Michigan with Robbie Bosco on a gimpy leg to be able to come back and win that national title in that Holiday Bowl. Jim McMahon, legendary, rallying from 23 points down with under 4 minutes to go in that Miracle Bowl in 1980. BYU ground out a hard-fought 19-15 win in that Cotton Bowl over Kansas State. Yes, Zach Wilson was perfect passing in that Potato Bowl in 2018. Yes, Zach Wilson 2 years later in 2020 down there in Boca Raton. I was there watching him absolutely slice and dice the UCF Knights that night. But everything that went into this game this past Saturday night for the BYU football program indicates to me, and I'm welcoming your guys' comments because I'm sure I'm going to get some backlash for this. Considering the circumstances BYU found itself in that Alamo Bowl, it is the most dominant win in BYU Bowl history, and I will not hear otherwise, at least from my side of things. BYU had the Heisman Trophy winner, had a guy in Shedeur Sanders who's considered to be top 3 at worst in terms of quarterbacks in this upcoming NFL draft. They had the man, the myth, the legend, Deion Coach Prime Sanders on the opposing sideline coaching up the Colorado Buffaloes. The Buffaloes were the 23rd ranked team in the country, 9-3 on the season. As I mentioned, all the talent in the world, a who's who of celebrity people on the sideline. Terrell Owens in Colorado gear, Bill Goldberg of wrestling fame. His son's a linebacker on that Colorado team. It's a freaking, what do you call it? Like a swarm of celebrities around Colorado. And for BYU to absolutely dismantle and demolish those Colorado Buffaloes, it truly is the most dominant win in BYU Bowl history. A lot of you know that I was down there in San Antonio. On my way back, I did my film review watching this game back. And I got to say, in every facet of the game, BYU dominated start to finish. There was zero doubt about this. Keelan Marion could have caught a pass on the opening play of the game had he not probably had his eyes messed with the defender crossing him over as that ball arrived. He could have walked into the end zone, and BYU could have been up 7-0 the first play of the game. That's how open he was going to be had he caught that pass. Mata Avata'ase, he had an opportunity to add to BYU's lead and had it glance off his fingertips. Had Jake Retzloff and Gary Bohannon not combined for 3 interceptions as well as an intercepted 2-point conversion. Now, the 3 interceptions actually count on the stat sheet, whereas the interception on the 2-point conversion just a failed conversion. But how often, and I talked with a number of people on my way back, and by the way, to you out there in Cougar Nation who took the time to say hello, Jake, Austin, Ty, that's just like a sampling of the Cougar fans. I met a ton of you on this trip, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support. Some of you guys found out what I did and said you're going to start listening to the podcast. Welcome on in if you truly were going to follow through on that. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU showed out on a national stage and very well may have played in front of the biggest TV audience in program history and absolutely flattened the Colorado Buffaloes with their vaunted offense, their stars, the Heisman Trophy winner, everything that goes into the glitz and glamour of Colorado. Everybody that tuned in to watch Coach Prime, to watch Shedeur, to watch Travis Hunter do their thing, watched the BYU team just run roughshod over that squad. That's why I believe this is truly the most dominant win in BYU program history. The crazy thing about this is, I mentioned on our postcast edition of the show, BYU was messing all night long with Colorado with the looks they were giving them defensively. Gary Anderson told us in the media corps that BYU gave Shedeur 17 different looks in the first half alone and absolutely had him befuddled and confused. And all BYU did really with their rush was bring 3- and 4-man guys. They would overload the different sides of the offensive line for Colorado at times, obviously, to mix things up. But they were winning one-on-one battles. Tyler Batty was absolutely incredible off of the edge in his final game as a Cougar. BYU on offense, yeah, some of those drops and some ill-timed interceptions precluded BYU from easily could have been over the 50-point mark, and probably could have been close to the 50-point mark at halftime had things broken a little differently for them. BYU's offense was kind of the one thing that held them back in this game, and it's more about execution than it was about play calling for me. Now, that's obviously going to draw some backlash as well. Well, Aaron Roderick needs to call better. No, he was in his bag, as the kids like to say. He was calling some incredible things. I saw wrinkles in the BYU offense I had not seen before. If you want to see an example of those, go to my Twitter feed at Jacob C. Hatch. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it right there to the lower left of where you're watching this. And I kind of typified and I put out some screenshots of new wrinkles in the BYU offense. And that's not even to preclude what BYU did on special teams. Parker Kingston notched his second punt return touchdown of the season, and he wasn't even touched. He went right up the gut of the Colorado punt team, and just that one, wow. Showed off his speed, showed off his skill, his vision. The blocking from his teammates was incredible. BYU did everything, and I mean everything right, and they refused to let Colorado up off the deck. I know that there are going to be people who are saying, well, Jake, you probably listened back to the commentary from Dave Pasch and Dusty Dvoracek. Yes, I did. And we'll talk about that momentarily. But the bigger point to be made here, everybody, is BYU on a national stage they have not seen very often. And they'll probably see it a little more often now as members of the Power Four as they get bigger and bigger platforms to play on. But in this circumstance, and the platform they were on against the caliber of opponent, against the glitz and glamour and the bright lights of everything that Colorado brought into this game, BYU shined brightest with prime time on the opposite sideline. That for me, that's truly incredible and a tip of the cap to Kalani Sitake and his team.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $500, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, do live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And you can go ahead and take a look at the second round of the college football playoff. Despite having already beaten Ohio State, Oregon are 2.5-point underdogs against the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl. Penn State heads into the Fiesta Bowl favored by 10.5 points over Heisman runner-up Ashton Jeanty and the Boise State Broncos. Both teams are a combined 10-0 in the Fiesta. Despite the larger line, this should be a good one. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Nebraska is bowl game winners for the first time since 2015.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast.
Nebraska has won the Pinstripe Bowl 20-15. It got a little bit too close for comfort at the end, but the Huskers are a winner, and Ramir Johnson is the story of the day. I think that was what we knew when the game ended, and then what Matt Rule had to say, and we'll play that clip in a few minutes. By the way, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic here with you on the Locked On Nebraska pod, joined by Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone in Omaha. We'll play that Rule clip for you in a couple of minutes here, talking about Ramir Johnson, Nebraska's sixth-year senior running back, playing in the shadow of his home neighborhood, Harlem, here in New York City at Yankee Stadium on a cold, wet Saturday. He was the star. He made the play at the end to get Nebraska to victory when it looked like the Huskers wanted to drop this thing one more time like we've seen so often. Connor, a feel-good day all around, despite the score being a little bit too close. It was 20-2 with 7 minutes to go in the game, and we finish up 20-15, but Nebraska has a winning season for the first time since 2016.
Yeah, it almost felt like it had to sort of end that way, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's gonna get tight. Nebraska built themselves a nice little cushion, 20-2. Boston College really wasn't doing anything. Countless fourth down stops for Nebraska's defense throughout the entire game. The defense was really, really good in the slop of Yankee Stadium, and turned them away multiple times on the game. And then all of a sudden, what happens? Well, first a blocked extra point that gets taken back for 2 points, and you start to get queasy, and then a blocked punt that is scored on a play or two later, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, is this the Iowa game again? What is happening? But Nebraska with an opportunity with the lead and an opportunity to close the game out, did it. And they did not leave it in the other team's hands. And so it felt like it's kind of poetic in that way. I would have preferred it to not. Husker fans would have preferred it to not end that way. But it did. And it almost feels mildly better because of it, maybe.
Yeah, there's some closure. There's like a circular effect. We're going to talk about special teams at some point in the show. We're going to talk about Dylan Raiola, who had some things happen on the final drive, the final 4-minute drive that were interesting. Yeah. Let's first talk about Ramir Johnson, who ran the ball for 11 yards on 4th and 1 to get to exactly 1,000 yards in his career. He finishes with 1,000 yards rushing in his career. He scored the first rushing touchdown of his senior season in the first quarter, a 4-yard run with his old youth team, the Harlem Jets, looking on from the end zone seating or the infield seating, whatever it is at Yankee Stadium. Family also looking on, which is even more poignant when you hear Matt Rule talk about this. Here's the clip.
I'll probably get a little bit emotional saying this, so please forgive me, but Ramir has never allowed anyone really to know what happened to him this year. But a year ago, he got hurt and missed the whole season. And I sat there with him in my office, as he wept, and the opportunity came to come back this year, and he decided to come back with really no guarantees. His mom was really, really sick for the whole season. And I asked him to go home. President Gold intervened and got us in contact with doctors here that were taking care of his mom as she was preparing for hospice. And I asked Ramir to go home, and he wouldn't go home. He had to play that game. He had to stay here with his teammates. Went home on the bye week. Asked me not just to tell anyone. He didn't want to be a distraction. Only let Emmett know. And they lost his mom. He lost his mom in November. And, those are the kids that got me into coaching. Those are the men that keep me in coaching, and he's awesome. And so for him to go out there and do that today, for him to have that run, for us to have to get him out of the stands to get him to accept the MVP trophy, it was never about him. So you forgive me for that, but I told him I was going to share that because it's never been about him. He loved his mother. He lost his mother, and he cares about this team. I think this is a fitting end for him. So I hope he wears his pads home on the subway and goes to his apartment, takes that MVP trophy, and takes it out tonight somewhere. So with that was long. I'm sorry, but I love that kid. I love those seniors, and I'm grateful for them. So with that, I'll take your questions.
That's pretty cool.
You don't get a story like that every year.
No, how crazy. We talked about it all, and I don't know. I certainly didn't know that part of the backstory.
I don't think anyone knew.
Yeah,
I don't know how many guys on the team knew.
Yeah, I didn't know that part of this. Exactly. Right. But so we thought about Ramir all week in the sense that, he's coming home and it's cool. We talked about it in the podcast before, like, look, there's the building that he was born in, and the full circle moment of, Rule talking about that, and his mom had passed away in November. I mean, that's crazy. And he wins the freaking MVP. He may have had his best game as a Husker in his final game in his backyard. Like, I mean, it's
certainly his most impactful game, and the most impactful way you could finish a game. How long has it been since Nebraska has been able to salt away a victory? Since Nebraska has taken the ball with an opportunity to run out the clock and not given it back to the opponent, or in similar fashion, had an opportunity to win a game or tie a game at the end and fallen flat. It feels like it's been Ramir Johnson's entire career. I know it hasn't been that long, but that's what it felt like on Saturday at Yankee Stadium when the Huskers got the ball with 4 minutes and 11 seconds left.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a list that, so this guy on Twitter, Sumanji Eric, he does the list of basically all the times that Nebraska had an opportunity to take the ball. They had the ball to drive down the field and grab a win or tie the football game. And they had only won one of those games in their last 35 attempts at doing that, or something like that. I mean, it was nuts. Now, this wouldn't follow that exact situation, but it does speak to your point, Mitch, of like, I mean, Nebraska's been in that situation a lot, and they've stepped in their own, they've stubbed their toe a lot. And for that run too, I mean, the fourth down run, the going for it, the fourth down run of like, we're gonna freaking give it to Ramir, and then he bowls over a guy. And I mean, it was perfect. It was a heck of a way to end that game.
Ty Robinson as a fullback on that play. He's in there leading the way. 6th-year senior for 6th-year senior. One on offense, one on defense, both playing, lining up in the I formation. Matt Rule told Ramir before that play, when the play call came in and it was 4th and 1, Dylan, well, we'll get to this, but he slid too soon on the 3rd down play and didn't move the chains. So Rule tells Johnson, get the first down, hold on to the ball, and let's finish this thing right. And, he's not just talking about the game. Like, he's not just talking about let's finish the game right. But let's finish this season right. Let's finish this drive right for once. And clearly for Ramir Johnson is let's finish your career right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Think about what he's been through. Think about coming to Nebraska as a kid from New York City in 2019, and you're here for a year, and the world gets shut down, and you're 1,300 miles from home. And, then you go through all of the crap that he endured with injuries and a coaching change and an offensive change that didn't necessarily favor his style of play. And the injury last year when he was just 3 games into the season that seemingly could have ended his career, and Nebraska recruits Dante Dowdell to come in and be the guy that we saw Ramir be on Saturday to ice this game. Yeah. So, after Dowdell goes into the portal, just weeks ago.
He outlasted him. Like, he's been here. Dowdell was here for less than a year, outlasted him. And like you said, I mean, it's very likely that in that exact situation, now, they're probably going to hand it off to Ramir in that situation because of the circumstances of where the game was and all of that. But in a real game, in a real scenario, that's Dante Dowdell's ball. Like, they're handing it to him, and they're telling him to go run over the guy.
I think they do it in that game too. If Dante's there, I mean, that's not the moment to be sentimental right there. That's the moment to win the game, and you go with your best option. Now, I think Nebraska was sentimental in the first half when Ramir got the ball on the 4-yard line on the opening play of the second quarter, and that is why I picked Ramir to score the first points of the
great call by you.
Bowl. May have been the only one that I got right in that game, but I did get that one right. But you get to the end, and I think that ball is probably going to Dante Dowdell in most situations. In fact, I'm kind of surprised it didn't go to Emmett Johnson, but you gave it to the 5'10", 200-pound guy, 10-pound guy, or 200-pound guy, and he powered his way through the line and got 11 yards, got himself to 1,000, and got Nebraska a victory.
It's beautiful. So 7-6. I just did the there is a website called timeanddate.com, and you can calculate how many days are in between days. So Nebraska's last bowl game victory, December 26, 2015, in the Foster Farms Bowl, that was 3,291 days ago.
Yeah. Mike Riley with a 5-7 team there in 2015, getting it done against UCLA.